everyone. Welcome to Wellness Wednesdays with Stephanie. This is my new podcast, and my mission is sharing stories about healing and connecting our global community to concepts related to optimal wellness. This is a passion of mine. It's something that I've been focused on for almost 20 years now. Started a wellness center based on this concept. I started a YouTube channel based on this concept. In fact, if you look back in my history, you'll see Wellness Wednesdays with Stephanie YouTube vlogs that I posted during the pandemic. Decided to start doing a podcast because I wanted to reach more of a global community. And so the vision is essentially to inspire the world to live better with radiant health of the body, mind, and spirit. And so we're always looking for interviewees and other healers that are in the same industry, trying to help people with their optimal wellness, getting them to a better life experience. I want to share my own wisdom, and I have a lot of wisdom about holistic wellness. And so if you don't know what the word holistic is, holistic is your whole entire being. It has nothing to do with religion or anything like that. It's really just a word that indicates your entire being is being considered in a holistic way. And I also want to connect people to the healing therapies that I've experienced and that the other practitioners who are going to be interviewed on this podcast are also going to share. Anything that will allow us to get closer and closer to optimal wellness is exactly what we're focused on here at Wellness Wednesdays with Stephanie. Welcome. I'd like to introduce you to my friend, Shera Renee. She's the Transformational Coach and Intuitive Guide. And Shera, would you give us a little introduction about who you are and what you're up to?
Hey, I am so happy to be here, Stephanie. Thank you so much for inviting me to basically tell my story. So, yes, I'm a transformational coach. I've been coaching others through life transitions and career transitions for nearly 20 years. And when I first started my coaching practice, I realized that, this is a lot more than just, what do I want to do, or with my life, or what's my business, or what's my job, next job. I started to really uncover, as I develop relationships with my clients, what is really underneath the desire or the lack of clarity, or the purpose that wants to emerge. And I got very involved in healing work. And I was also been on my own journey pretty much since I discovered I needed to be on a healing journey. So I would say over 40 years. So I started to work with my clients, again, professional clients, some of them very, very high level positions in Silicon Valley and many other places. But we started to dive underneath limiting beliefs, inner child work, shadow work. I worked with visualizations. I worked with neurolinguistics, neurolinguistic programming, lots of different communication models, and also energy work. As a side note, I'm a natural intuitive. For those that understand astrology, I have 5 planets in the 12th house, which is the house of Pisces. And it's also the house of the collective unconscious. It allows me to really see deep into a person's soul and deep into their character. So when I lived in Sedona, Arizona, until not too long ago, I finally had a chance to come out of the closet, if you will, as an intuitive. And I started giving readings and other energy sessions to not just tourists and visitors that came from every part of the world, but also to local business owners and just locals in the community. So right now I'm merging, if you will, my coaching that I've been doing for so long with those in transition, along with my intuitive and healing gifts. So when I discovered your series or your podcast, I thought this is a perfect opportunity to be in dialogue with you and share my story.
Beautiful. So we talked about the title of this conversation being The Power of the Wounded Healer and ways to regulate when you're activated. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. We talked about how to nurture your inner child and how to have that as a part of your spiritual practice. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, Shera, because it's so needed and relevant right now. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. So where would you like to start? What tools?
I think that what might be really helpful for listeners is to talk a little bit about the concept of the wounded healer, because I think many people probably that will be listening to this broadcast probably have heard about the wounded healer, or what is the wounded healer. So let's just start there. It's an archetype, first of all. It was first introduced to me again through a wounded healer, but through a healer way back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, when I was, really diving deep into my process, if you will. And the wounded healer is someone that has gone through their hero's journey, if you will, or heroine's journey. The wounded healer is someone who has I don't want to use encountered the dark night of the soul, very possibly numerous times. The wounded healer is someone who has really had what would be looked upon from the outside, externally, as a lot of adversity, and has chosen to make it part of their, if you will, their spiritual path. A few more things I'd like to say about the wounded healer. Like I said, it is an archetype. I feel that it's also because of the wounds, if you will, which we're going to dive deep into. I feel like the wounded healers are probably the most authentic healers, if you will. I think to experience the wounds of your clients or whatever their situation is, if you've had direct experience with that, my experience is that you have many, many, many windows to what avenue I can take, what modality we can work on together, but many windows into the fractured parts of their soul. I mean, some people call this shamanic work. We may or may not get into that topic. It's used too much, basically. And I have very specific parameters around the definition of a shaman. And we can also get into that. So I think that's what the wounded healer is for me. And when I started to embrace that archetype, the wound is always there. It's not like the wound leaves, but the wound becomes the medicine, and the wound is the medicine that you share with your clients.
Oh, that's powerful. Yeah. So I'm curious about, can we dive a little deeper into your own wounds and your healing process?
Well, diving deeper into my own wounds, like many, particularly in my generation, but it's not necessarily generational, nor is it ethnic or cultural or race. But I did have, like many, my early childhood was flavored with abuse and neglect. I think those are the easiest terms to use: emotional, mental abuse, physical and sexual. And single mother, no father, single mother without skills, without support, basically. And so I didn't really realize the effects of that and the multi-leveled, if you will, and complex trauma that arose from that until probably, as I look back on my timeline, probably age 17, 18 is when I really, or certainly by age 20, realized that, wow, something is really off here.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's sort of a very easy way to describe, or simple way to describe, early childhood complex trauma. But the abandonment, the neglect, all of that, and and the belief systems that develop as a result of that, and the fragments one's soul that result from that. So I'm a huge advocate of soul work, soul retrieval, if you will, with the right person or persons or facilitators. We can probably get into a little bit more soul retrieval in this conversation. Again, I'm not positioning myself as a shaman, but I definitely have tools to help others open up some of the windows to their soul.
That's beautiful. So we talked about the use of conscious communication to maintain connection.
Oh, wow.
So how does that relate to the healing journey of the inner child?
we're going to have to do a little bit of a rewind here, because my work with conscious communication is, to me, that Marshall Rosenberg, who created nonviolent communication, was one of my many, many teachers. I embraced his work probably about 20 years ago, but this is after doing several decades of very deep work. And so kind of rewind, and I think starting with inner child work is probably really important.
Okay. So how did you access your inner child? Where did you start?
Yeah, the inner child work started early. My inner child work, once I realized and discovered that, oh wait, something happened here early on, where my little inner child got like buried, and she's scared and hiding and doesn't feel loved and didn't have love, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she's abandoned and abused and not loved. So my inner child journey, or accessing her, started with Hatha yoga with a teacher from India. So I learned, I call it authentic, genuine yoga, including pranayama practices. Pranayama, I would imagine most of your viewers or listeners are familiar with, but it's a specific set of breathing exercises that we do with alternate nostrils. It's a beautiful practice to do in the morning. It grounds you. It relaxes the nervous system, and it opens up your pineal gland. So that's that's where my practice started.
Actually, so did mine in my 20s, Hatha yoga. I was 23 when I discovered yoga, and it broke me open.
And what else it did is it opened me up to a community of other seekers, others that were on a path, and had chosen an Eastern philosophy or practice to be on that path, to walk that path. Then the journey brought me back to something that I loved very much as a child, and that was performing, particularly in theater, dance, movement. So I re-entered in my 20s the somatic journey, if you will. I found physical theater and improv theater to be incredibly healing as part of my path. Parts of me were able to come out. The role playing was very beneficial. A lot of the activities, the connection activities that you do, the say yes activities, all of this was like validating to parts of me. So the dance and the theater was actually a very large part of my healing journey. I worked personally with Gabrielle Roth, who is the creator of the 5 Rhythms, which is a global movement. It has been for, I guess, almost 30 years now. Very specific dance form, 5 different rhythms, as she calls them. In and of themselves, they're archetypes. This is pre-ecstatic dance.
Okay.
I mean, much, I would just say much more spiritual and connected and intentional.
That makes sense.
So, yeah. So that was a big part of my early healing journey. And then living in California in the Bay Area, I had access to Esalen Institute and just did numerous therapies there, again, with others who were deep in the path or on the path. I also adopted a Buddhist daily practice in the Mahayana tradition that I'm very grateful for that because it was a morning and evening practice. So it allowed me to let go of substances because I couldn't have a clear head and have an intentional practice if I was using alcohol or substances. And I just want to put a side note in there. I think the 12-step program is fabulous. So that was also part of my healing journey a little bit further on, but it's awesome. For anyone that has an unhealthy relationship with substances, that's probably one of the most accessible programs available. We can pause here. There's a lot more to the journey. I'm just, I'm like starting 40 years ago, but some of those signposts that I just mentioned, I find were extremely important to get me walking in an intentional direction where I could start to at least embody and embrace who I am.
Beautiful. Yes. I had a similar journey. Meditation led me to Buddhism, and Buddhist practices. What I was introduced to was Zazen. So it's a mindfulness meditation, totally different than the yoga meditations you learn from yoga teachers and, guided meditations. And it really, what it did was open me up to what I'm experiencing right in this moment, which is a much different experience.
Exactly.
So meditation's powerful. There's so many different ways to do it. So I'd love to hear your perspective on meditation, how it changed your reality.
Thank you so much for asking me that. Yeah, there's so many tools available now. It's wonderful to be alive in these times. My meditation. So I started with sound, like sound mantra meditation, which was very good for me because it brought me deeper into the body. And I needed that. I needed to, I'm just going to say, loosen the stuck parts and using sound. This is before sound healing became like everyone's doing. You can go to Sedona and there's like 24 sound healings in any given day, right? But this was before that era. We still knew about sound and 432 hertz, et cetera, but my sound or my meditation began with mantras and chanting. And that the chanting, what it does to the different areas of your body and different chakras. I worked with a very specific chant, which I still do. Just want to say the Mahayana tradition is also, Mahayana is the Bodhisattva path. So the Bodhisattva is one who consciously, none of us are free until all of us are free is basically the philosophy. So your Bodhisattvas of the earth are those who intentionally help others awaken, but they do it on an equal level. We don't put ourselves above, like I am now awakened and therefore I can help you. It's like, no, we're all awakening together, regardless of our soul age or our level of consciousness. There's no judgment there. So I love the Mahayana path. The Hinayana, which is the Vipassana meditation, which was a huge breakthrough for me. So I'm going to share now I'm getting to meditation. I've studied with Jack Kornfield, was my primary teacher, who was one of the founders of the Insight Meditation Society, and we have Spirit Rock in California. Gwenke is a Burmese monk who I also did some very deep 10-day practices with. But the true Vipassana, it's not pranayama, but it is a lot of nostril breathing. And you learn how to do a body scan. And basically you're sitting 12 hours a day for 10 days. Those are the intense retreats. And I've had absolute, I could feel like karma and energy burning inside my body, like unbelievable releases. You can choose on your 8th and 9th day to go into, this is another form, go into an all completely dark, like a closet, but a completely dark room, if you will.
Mhm.
And that is where, without psychedelics, this is the first time, or not the first time, but without psychedelics, where I experienced no body, just a complete merging with all that is. I mean, I had no form. And that was an incredible experience. My meditations today, because that's what we're talking about, I think for anybody, regardless of where you're at on your spiritual path, to take time each day. Morning is preferable before you start your day. Usually the same time each day is wonderful, and to have a specific spot, energetically, an altar, but a spot that is your sacred spot. I say at least 20 minutes, up to an hour if you really can. But, sitting in silence is one of the greatest teachers and access to your inner wisdom. And learning that Vipassana breathing is a beautiful way to do it. So I try and do some kind of either mantra or meditation every morning. And if I'm really in a good disciplined routine, I'll do it in the evening as well. I just want to add to that, the yoga practice can also, yoga was actually, the practice of yoga means union, union with self, union with body, mind, spirit. Yoga, the original intention of Hatha yoga, for example, was to prepare you for meditation. It was to loosen your, to release blocks in your body so that when you sit silently, when you finally sit, you have just more access to the multi dimensions of wisdom that are available to all of us.
Most definitely. It's a quieting of the body so that you can get into the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my practice today is at least that silence, and I just like to encourage everybody to try it if you haven't. There's so many different apps available now too. I have nothing against apps. It's just that having your phone could be a distraction. That's the only problem when you're meditating. And I once got severely reprimanded at a retreat center while meditating that I had my phone with me, just timing my session, right? But for people that are just starting, there's 10-minute guided meditations. There's 20-minute. Whatever works for you to get you started to access, it's golden wisdom. The silence and the conversations with silence, for me, is golden wisdom.
Definitely. So I'm curious then, after discovering meditation, what was the dark night of your soul? When did you really realize that there was some healing that you could do and get you into this beautiful transformational path for where you are now?
Thank you very much. Well, I'm still on the path for sure.
Yes, we all are, right?
Dark night of the soul. And I want to define that. Again, I'm going to define it more through the lens of a coach. And then I'm going to back up a little bit and share a few other practices that I have found very helpful. For those on, any juncture, I'll just put it that way. But for me, dark night of the soul is when we no longer have a sense of identity or a clarity of identity. It's all things. It's a breakdown of all things familiar. Dark night of the soul also is normally or oftentimes characterized with, one or more of the following. It could be a divorce or a separation, could be loss of home, loss of job. It could be, an intense betrayal by community. I mean, just all kinds of things, but it's where you are. Could be an ostracization. There's a sense of being very alone, not seen, not heard, not understood. Some shock could be related to dark night of the soul, but it's where you're questioning everything, but you don't have sense of self anymore. And Michael Beckwith talks about this quite a bit, from the Agape, the founder of Agape. But dark night of the soul is also the opportunity to start having what I call conversations with God, or conversations with trusted source, if you will, conversations with whatever higher power one chooses. And how can we have those conversations? How? Meditation, silence, walking in nature. Journaling is amazing. And anybody that works with me, regardless of what we're doing in our coaching relationship or what we're focusing on, journaling is part of it. I have very specific and powerful practices that I share with my clients.
Awesome.
Is that, I mean,
that's
like
great.
I should pause because I could tell a long story.
Yeah, no, that's great. Let me see. So you touched a little bit about grounding. Can we go a little deeper? Maybe explain to the audience what is grounding?
I think that's a really good question, because it's like, I used to hear, you're not grounded. You're not, you don't feel grounded. And I always felt that, I heard this, younger, and it's like, well, what is that? What does grounded even mean? Grounded, what I've learned over the years, and I still have to do quite a bit to stay grounded because I move around a lot. But grounded is feeling, it's a feeling, it's a state of being. Where you are completely present in your body. So that I'm aware of every part of my body. I am aware of what's around me. I'm aware of the senses, the scents, the sounds, the colors. All of that is what I call grounded.
Okay.
When we're not feeling grounded, some of the quickest ways to do that, number one, is just get your feet on the ground and just breathe. And nice deep breaths, lots of grounding exercises where I probably everybody here listening understands about grounding cord, but you allow your first chakra to go deep into the earth. And so she can hold you and remind you, like, oh, here is home, right? So that's a really good way to just, pause and ground and breathe. And then eventually you work through all the chakras so that you've got this cord from I call it the heavens, from divinity down to mama earth, Gaia, Pachamama. Another great way to ground when you're really just like, you just put your hands on the ground. If you've got access to nature, put your hands on soil. I've got another whole talk I do on soil is soul, and that's more for the soil is soul. So other ways to ground, sometimes a lot of movement and sweat, and then do the things I just said. Do you have any favorite grounding exercises? Curious.
Honestly, just walking on the planet. So like taking your shoes off and walking in dirt or in grass is such a grounding experience, just being with the planet. It's a simple thing. You could do it while you're walking your dog, which I've done before.
What's interesting, people now are using the expression now is earthing. Earthing. What is
Earthing,
earthing?
yeah.
Walking barefoot. So
Yeah.
there you go, walking barefoot on, if you have if you're near the ocean, for example, that's fabulous way to ground, just walking barefoot on sand or beach, but just
Yeah.
walk barefoot on grass, on a path, in nature.
Yeah. In fact,
That's a fabulous way.
there's even science about earthing and how when we connect with the earth, it balances our energy field because the energy field of the planet has a vibration that brings us down to a more centered space. So it's now scientifically supported, which is really great.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. So I think those are good grounding exercises. I go back to my Vipassana quite a bit as well when it's just like, okay, let me just come back here, feel all of me in silence. And, I've watched really so-called advanced teachers, advanced meditation teachers, or just, spiritual teachers. And I've seen them come back in like 30 seconds or for sure within a minute, just doing what I just said about going inside. If there's a lot of activity, you've got an audience of 1,000 people waiting for you to speak and you're setting up the stage. There's a lot going on, right? So just coming back to, I've had the opportunity to observe and support, projections like that. So it's not as difficult. It's not like training for the Olympics. Grounding right. is easy. It's easy and accessible to all of us, which I love.
Awesome. We also touched on limiting beliefs.
Oh,
can you give me an example of a limiting belief that you faced and conquered in your healing?
Yeah. The one that I've conquered, I still work with limiting beliefs. I work with different cognitive practices around limiting beliefs. I worked with hypnotherapy, which I recommend. And somatic work as well. Peter Levine's work is fantastic. Somatic experiencing, his work is fabulous around, the trauma that produces the limiting beliefs. Right. So what is one that I transformed? There's something wrong. We're here to expose ourselves, right?
Exactly, right.
There's something wrong with me because I'm single. I
think a lot of people experience that one.
I think or I'm not desirable because I'm a mature woman. I mean, things like that. So here I'm going to share. So I've overcome that. I feel very good about who I am. I also, embrace relationships and the mirrors they provide. I think being in a healthy relationship is an accelerated path to our awakening.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's, for me, a relationship is a path to the divine. That's, to understand me, to understand you better. But how I overcame these are just a few of the limiting beliefs. And I can also share with what I discovered was underneath them in just a second. But sure. A lot of journaling work, is really good. Another method by Byron Katie called The Work, where you actually question the truth of the belief. There's other exercises that are borrowed from what's called cognitive CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, where you just, it's like you believe it 100% and you work with it through a series of questions. You get down to maybe the belief is now at 50% until finally it doesn't have control over your thinking processes, basically. Another wonderful way to overcome limiting beliefs or work with them is a process called the emotional freedom technique, EFT, we're tapping. Even though I'm single, for example, I deeply, completely, and absolutely accept myself, and you tap the various
right.
And then, you get to a point where I really love myself, or I embrace being single, and I'm grateful for my autonomy, and I'm in relationship.
Sudden love shows up, right?
Yeah. So it's, these, I'm just touching like, kindergarten version of these very deep processes that can be daily practices. So that's, those are some of the ways to overcome limiting beliefs. I've worked with organizations and their teams as well. And there's another process because teams have limiting beliefs about what we can and can't do, or we've never done that before. It's never been done before. And it gets in the way, it blocks the way of innovation. And so it's called appreciative inquiry, and it's used a little bit more in a team situation.
Right.
So it's, there's so many beautiful ways to work with limiting beliefs. What's possible, just framing it. What is possible? What else is possible? What's the best that can happen? Right?
Right.
Basic questions if you want to just snap out of it right away.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's see. We also touched a little bit on soul retrieval. So you want to talk a little bit about that experience and how to access soul retrieval.
Right. I want to, before we do that, because I don't do soul retrievals. I've had them done.
Right. But your experience with it, so the audience understands what it is exactly.
So what happens, and I definitely want to speak about the inner child journey. But what happens with my experience with soul retrievals, and I've worked with, I want to call them pioneers, they're old timers, just soul retrieval has been around forever in indigenous cultures, particularly. And, over the millennia has found its way into, our contemporary healing modalities, if you will. But I've worked with some very authentic people. I would say that one of the best better organizations now in the Western society, Western cultures, is the Four Winds Society. I find his work very authentic. And so anyway, so I've had some soul retrieval with it. What is soul retrieval? Soul retrieval is when you've been traumatized as a child, usually as a child, but it could be any time. You cut off a part of yourself, you hide a part of yourself, and you no longer have that access to that part of yourself, meaning you've lost access to a part of your soul. And our soul is our guide, right? Our soul is our divine blueprint guide, if those words make sense together. So what happens in a soul retrieval experience is that through various, could be certain parts of your body are tapped or you're made aware of. There's usually sound involved. There's definitely breath work can be involved. It loosens with that part that got trapped. It opens a door, if you will, or it cracks open the shield or the armor. Different questions can be asked. Different visualization journeys can be incorporated. Oftentimes there's sound, like a rattle. Definitely in with the indigenous traditions.
Sure.
There's rattling. I've been involved a little bit, and I've witnessed many soul work sessions where we're removing entities. Well, what does that mean? It means that because when you're traumatized, you open up a part of yourself where different energies that are not yours can enter your being. And those entities aren't always your friends. I mean, they're like parasites. They're trying to find a home. And so shamanic work or soul retrieval work also is able to detach that parasite, if you will, detach that energy from you and basically send it on its way. And, so that is some of my experience with soul retrieval. I have found it, I can do more, and but I have found it extremely, in the early parts, extremely beneficial in just, again, bringing the pieces back together because
Mhm,
there was a
mhm.
shattering, right? So it's like, well, with some of those puzzle pieces are, they're in somebody else's yard, or just
Right.
as an analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So you also mentioned shadow work and inner child work. I think it's all really related in your healing journey. So how can we make those
Yeah.
connections?
Well, shadow work is really, because they're a little bit different for me. The
Mhm.
shadow work is, we all have a shadow. Shadow. What is the shadow? The shadow is parts of, again, uh, parts of you. They're your deepest fears. I'll just put it that way. Your shadow
Okay.
is your deepest fears, but they are fears that, number one, we're maybe not yet in touch with, so we can't claim them,
Right.
and they affect our behavior in unhealthy ways. They affect our relationships in unhealthy. They affect every part of our life in unhealthy ways. Shadow work is, again, that which can't be seen, which is affecting that which can be seen in an unhealthy, disconnected way. That's how I would describe the shadow itself. So in
Sure.
Jungian psychology and other psychologies, but Jungian primarily, introduced a way of, first of all, discovering the shadow, because we all have the shadow, and embracing and befriending the shadow. So first of all, discovering, okay, who are you? What is your purpose here? What do you want with, Alberto or Shera or whomever, right? Just
Mhm.
what is it that you want her to know? Why are you here? These sorts of things. But shadow work as well is asking yourself, this is a very Western way of approaching, but asking yourself, what is it that I'm pretending not to know?
Hmm.
So I have found that question, again, when I work with people in transition. We may not be doing really deep, healing work, but what am I pretending not to know? So
Wow.
it's
That's a great journal prompt.
pretending not to know. So, and then all kinds of things come out, lots of different fears. Shadow work is also very beneficial when you're in relationship, not just intimate one-on-one, but just relationship with teams, with community, with family, with friends. I always notice that where shadow work is needed is when there's gossip.
Mm.
Someone said this about this, about this, and it's like, well, what's really going on here? What's really the fear here? Or shadow work is also something that could be very beneficial when people aren't speaking to each other for whatever reasons. So there's a journey to go in and find out what has been activated, from the past traumas.
Right.
Where's that fear? Where's that limiting belief? Yeah, I'll leave it at that. There's so much more to say. Maybe we could do another interview, because I work with a lot of different communication models
Okay.
in groups
I would
that
love that.
really uncover shadow, and we do it in a group, or not
Mhm.
a huge group, but there's ways to make things safe for people. Shadow work also is creating a safe environment for the shadow to come out and be seen.
Oh, yes.
And
Yes.
the trauma is that we all have, but the trauma that's within that keeps that shadow hidden. The shadow just wants to be seen, and then embraced, integrated, and released. So,
Mhm.
it's a freedom practice. I is another way to say it.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we come back to the inner child work?
Yeah, because I think the inner child work is really important for those of us that have had
Trauma.
abuse and neglect as a child,
Mhm.
particularly early childhood, abandonment. So some of the easier, well, none of it's easy, but first of all, recognizing that there was lack of love. You didn't
Mhm.
get the support and love you needed as a child. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with you. So some of the first parts we have to work with is, first of all, talking to that inner child as a loving mother. And first of all, letting the inner child know that, wow, I hear what happened. I hear how painful that was. And acknowledging and validating all of that really did happen. And that the pain occurred, that all that pain is very real.
Sure.
And that none of that is about you being unworthy, unlovable, incapable, less competent, anything inferior. Because what happens when our inner child is traumatized is that she doesn't have, it's like a plant that's never repotted.
Right. It stays small.
Yeah, exactly. So she doesn't have a chance to, spread her wings and grow and create and discover and, all those things, right? So one of my favorite practices for inner child is just that conversations with the loving mother, basically. What would a loving mother say? I do work with the divine mother in her various archetypes. And I work with clients as well as how to bring the divine mother in her various archetypes. We choose whichever one works, right? Bring the divine mother into your heart, into your beingness, your heart chakra, and really let her permeate your beingness so that she touches the inner child can actually see her, feel her, awaken to her, and allow her in. There's sometimes images will be of just this, eyes wide open when the inner child is like, oh my goodness, she's finally, or he's finally being seen, right? And divine mother is always here. But how to embody, if you will, the divine mother within the heart center is, again, basic, simple enough, fundamental practice for inner child, I'm going to call it healing or awakening. So how do we know when our inner child is still running the show? You're contracting, you're feeling a need that wasn't met as a child is running the show again, running your relationships, running a reaction, if you will, rather than a response.
Right.
Demanding, making, so you just kind of know, it's like, but really what's going on is that you're feeling invalidated, not seen, not heard, not understood. So,
Right.
Again.
Actually, that's a nice little segue to conscious communication and the practices that bring those. I think that really conscious communication is what brings that awareness to any relationship.
Absolutely.
Including the one you have with yourself and your inner child.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are a lot of inner child and shadow work is addressed in conscious communication without being called that.
Right.
Marshall Rosenberg was not, he was just like, he was pretty straightforward about things. And I worked with, like I said, various models since Marshall. Some people criticize him that his work is a little bit too mental. But for those that haven't done, worked in conscious communication models or with what's called nonviolent communication, first of all, has enabled peace talks between Palestine and Israel. I mean, at that level. But at the basic level, and it's taught in schools now in elementary, it's when there's a conflict, when there's a misunderstanding, when there's a blame, when there's a judgment, when there's anything that is creating separation between you and another individual, what it means is, what it points to is that there's an unmet need. So the first thing we identify is the basic human needs that we all have. That's already an equalizer for everyone. Oh my goodness, we all have these needs, regardless of anything else, regardless of all the other influences from our culture, race, age, disabilities, mental capacities, all of it. So what are our needs? Basic needs. I've mentioned them several times, to be included, to be seen, to be heard, to be contributive, to be creative, to be playful. I mean, there's actually, I think there's over 100 needs that are, and they're very accessible. Then you look at what happens when those needs aren't met. What's the outcome when those needs aren't met? And so we start to look at the emotional reaction.
Right. The triggers.
Yeah, it's like, this is what happens when this need is not met. And then we look at, well, what happens when the need is met? Oh, we can do it reverse. When the need's met, what happens? When the need isn't met, what happens? We then take it to the next steps whoever we're in the conflict with, we start to learn how to recognize when a need is not being met in another. Without judging it, even without labeling it, but we start a conversation. So different ways to do that. So I'll share one of the basic models, but that's the dance that's occurring. Need not being met. Self-recognizing need not being met. Self-recognizing. Other possibly recognizing need not being met. We start with ourselves. When I hear you say, or when I see you do, or however, but usually when I hear you say, I feel, and you name the feeling. And you can say, and my need for safety is not being met. So that's a basic language stem.
Definitely.
Yeah, in the NVC, or conscious communication model. We're assuming that everyone's got a little bit of education around this, but sometimes not. And if not, then it's a way to diffuse, to maybe just to diffuse a situation, or when another is triggered. When I see you, or when I hear you say this, I imagine that you may be feeling scared. Am I right? Or is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. So ways like that, but it's needs-based. It's recognizing unfulfilled needs. It's claiming the unfulfilled needs. It's recognizing, again, as I said, what can happen, the triggers, the emotional responses or reactions when needs aren't being met, and what happens when they are. Right. What is very beautiful now about conscious communication is that it's being taught in, to 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds.
So good.
My God.
So good.
Good. But in relationships, when I do some relationship coaching and counseling, and it's very based on the communication models. Yeah. So oftentimes we accomplish quite a bit with, just 3 months of sessions, learning how to use this needs-based model, along with presencing exercises, some of the breathing exercises that I've mentioned before, and the pausing and things of that nature. I hope I'm staying focused as I download some of these. So
yes. In fact, I mean, we've covered all of the points that we wanted to discuss. Do you have any final thoughts about this healing journey, the wounded healer, or regulating? Anything about that?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about regulating, just in general, especially for those are challenged with trauma. And we're always working with it. So as I mentioned early on in my path, somatics was a big part of it. So, somatic healing. I've mentioned journaling a lot. But there's something now that's also it's not new, but it's become very accessible, and it's working with the vagus nerve, which is a part of your autonomic nervous system, and calming down the vagus nerve, which I think is the longest nerve in the body. Runs central nervous system. So it's a combination, if you will, of breathing exercises, slowing down your breathing. Number one, not quite breath work, which we could also talk about, but basically what you want to do is you want to stimulate the vagus nerve so that it helps regulate moods, your actual mood or depressive thoughts, even, or this reactive, this, it could also episodic is actually, it's been used for people doing in seizures as
Okay.
well. But deep breathing exercises are very important just to slow down and to regulate the heart rate and your blood pressure. It's also can be used, or the vagus nerve can also be regulated by, and I love this because it ties into what I call dynamic meditation, introduced by one of my early teachers. But learning how to shake your body while you're laying down is a great way to stimulate the vagus nerve, to activate the vagus nerve. 1 minute, 2 minutes. You don't need to do this for a long time, but you don't want to just, lay down, and you got to be in a private space to do this. You just don't lay down in public in the subway. So things like that. So it's proven to be a again, these are like tools in the magic backpack is what I call it. I really believe in accessibility.
I do too.
Yeah, quick access to tools that we all have at our disposal, and all of us. So a couple other things I just want to touch up. So yeah, the vagus nerve, the deep breathing. I just want to mention too how valuable I see breath work being. It can be part of your daily spiritual practice once you have done enough sessions to know what is healthy for you. Is it a soft breathing, or you want to go into more of a holotropic? I recommend a gentler breathing if you're doing a daily practice. Another thing that's really helpful just for regulation, a little bit aside from vagus nerve, is foot reflexology, which I also do. Because you can touch every organ in your body and every system in your body through points in your feet. Again, tools available to us.
Yeah, and really self-healing tools.
Yeah, it's relieving emotional stress triggers.
Yeah, exactly.
So just kind of rounding it up, like the wounded healer. So first of all, if you, like me and thousands and thousands of others, are a wounded healer, first of all, I have gratitude for my past now. I have gratitude for my soul path. I am one that believes that we have, many soul journeys or many incarnations, and that we're simply here to continue to evolve the soul. So whatever happened in the past, actually in past lives, doesn't super matter. But as a wounded healer now, I see my role as, first of all, I'm grateful for the tools I've had in taking responsibility for my own healing, but it brings me great joy to be a guide for others as the wounded healer. Again, this has been very surface. I work a lot with shame, because shame comes up a lot when we're doing healing work. And but there's the thing is to embrace all of you. And what I offer are a lot of tools to help others do that.
Actually, that's a good segue to how can people reach you, Shera?
Yeah. Well, I think you're going to share my website.
Yes, I'll share your links in the descriptions, but I want, for anybody listening, how can they reach you? Yeah,
sure. Well, Coach Shera at Gmail is a great way. Shera is a great way. My website is it's undergoing a change, but it's got plenty of information, but it's sheraseaver.wixsite.com, igniting the spark. But if you just Google me, you will find me. Yes. And so that's a great way. I'm also listed on a very well-known platform, especially there in Arizona, in Sedona, and now in Northern California. It's called Soul Search.
Mhm.
So you can easily find me on soulsearch.io and just type in my name. I work in person and by Zoom, just depending on where I'm at geographically. And geographically, currently, I'm splitting time between Northern California, Arizona, and San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. So it's a pretty easy commute. So so that's why I do a lot of my work online.
Mhm.
I'm also involved with the International Reiki Association, which is quite large in San Miguel, and there's quite a few of Reiki practitioners there that I'm associated with.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, Shera. I so appreciate this conversation. I think it is going to be a powerful way to introduce these concepts to the community and what, access to these healing practices and ways that we can heal ourselves, and really just asking the questions to start the journey. So it's good. Good stuff.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun telling the story.
Definitely.
Thank you for holding the space. Bye-bye.